Hi, my name is Ritch Esra, and I am a 47-year veteran of the music industry. I got into it at 18 years old when I went to work for a magazine called Record World. It was very much like a Billboard or an NME at the time, and worked for them for, I think, maybe 2 days before they let me go. And the reason they let me go is because I wasn't old enough, ironically, to qualify for the insurance on the car that they gave me. The insurance company told them we need, if you know, because it's a big company, and if I had gotten into an accident, they carried a lot of coverage for their drivers. And my job was to drive around, get the magazines delivered to the newsstand, so forth. So they carried a big insurance policy on the car, and the insurance company said, we will not give that kind of insurance to anyone under the age of 26 at that time. So I lost that job and I ended up taking an internship about a year and a half later at A&M Records. And that really began my career at A&M. It was in 1980. And I worked in radio promotion as an intern for about a year before landing a job at Arista Records on the West Coast. And at that particular time, I guess I started in radio promotion and I worked there for maybe, I guess it must have been about 9 months. And during that period, I was helping the director of A&R. I would help him organize the tapes and, get things, set up for him and so forth. And eventually I moved into A&R. And I began doing my internship with A&R. I was ultimately, after a while, hired on full time, and that was my first full-time job where I was getting paid. And I remained in A&R at Arista Records until 1987, at which time I left and I began teaching courses on the music business at a place called Trebas Institute of Recording Arts. And then I went on to teach at UCLA and USC. And I did that for many, many years. And in 1992, I left and I began my own company called Music Business Registry. And what we do is we publish contact directories for the music industry. I do one for A&R. I do one for music publishers. I do one for music attorneys. I do one for film and television music supervisors. So these are directories that have all of the contact information for all of those people. All the A&R people at the record labels, who they are, who their assistant is, social media, everything. We put it out once a month. So any updates, so-and-so move from one company to another. And I've been doing that now for 33 years. We started it in 92, so it's 33 years. And in addition, I also teach courses at the Musicians Institute here in Los Angeles. I've been teaching there for, God, I guess since 2002. Been teaching courses on the music industry. And the other thing that I do is, like you, I have a channel for the music industry called MUBUTV, MUBUTV. It stands for Music Business Television. And what we do on MUBUTV is it's designed for artists and musicians and those who are committed to having a career in today's music business. And we achieve that by talking to people who are on the front lines of that business. Our conversations are to managers, to publishers, to A&R people, to PR people. What does it take? What do new artists need to know? What are people looking for? What does it take to get an agent? What's the agent's criteria? It's not just you're good. What do you need to be doing? All of that. So we get it from the horse's mouth rather than us just, telling people. We think that, I think it's better to hear it from the head of CAA, the touring, and that's who they want to get. They don't want to get to me. They want to get an agent at CAA to book them. So we get those people to talk. And those are the three major things that I do with my life these days. So I think that about covers it.
That's brilliant. That's amazing. So the thing is, it's kind of like, it's funny because I wrote a couple of books, and my second book is Moments That Rock, which is the kind of my brand, which is storytelling.
Yeah.
But I started in 1974, so I've probably got a few years on you age-wise. But you look good. But what I'm thinking immediately, Rich, is it's like I never like to put a downer on things. What you're doing is amazing, but we're talking about a completely different industry. The same as you, the mere mention of Clive Davis, let's be honest, these geezers aren't going to exist again, right? My
Right.
mentors, I worked for A&M and I worked for Arista back in the UK. That's when I set up independently. And I had a contract with BMG for 10 years, RCA and Arista and stuff. But going back to my stories about working with people whose records I'd bought as a kid. I bought Traffic albums in the 60s, worked with Steve Winwood in the 70s. My mentors were the music people. Chris Blackwell, Ahmed Ertegun, Jerry Moss, Herb Alpert, not accountants and lawyers, right?
Right. Those were giants who formed the business that we know today.
And if
Yeah.
you're going to have a mentor, it
Yeah.
doesn't come any better than that geezer, for God's sake. I mean,
Yeah.
he wrote the business model in as much as, and the fact that he's still going. But the thing is, it's like, I'm an idiot, right? I have a few of my own lines. I wrote in my book, like, to work with artists, you have to think like them. You have to get inside their head, but don't stay there too long. Right.
Yeah. Very true.
Yeah.
Yes, it is true. Yeah.
The
To
thing is,
understand them. Yeah.
there's a whole bunch of people out there. There are 120,000 songs a day that get uploaded to Spotify. It's a jungle. I could make a record. I can't sing and I can't play, but I could make a record. There's something wrong with that, right? So when it comes to talent acquisition, I mean, and now in the business of AI, it's like your business model has to change every hour to keep up with it.
Yes, you're absolutely right. There was a revolution. There was a revolution. And I think really it started, what you're talking about started when music went from a copy model of CDs, cassettes, vinyl, and even digital files to an access model where we got whatever we want, whenever we want, however we want, on any number of devices we want, on any number of platforms, wherever we are in the world, and we got it for free. That radically
Yeah.
changed the business model. And that was the revolution, I think. Revolutions, as you know, they produce two outcomes. One is a change of habits. We don't listen to radio, we listen to streaming, which is an entirely different model altogether, where you choose, you don't just sit back and let it come over you. The other thing that it produces, which I think is really important to your point, is it produces a change in values. And when I address the issue that you're speaking about, which is very important, it is a different world today. And part of the reason that when we talk about talent acquisition, that it is different, in my opinion, is that the values around the culture today regarding music are not completely music or artist based. They are, but in a different sense. The value, and it's not even. I'm convinced it's not conscious among the culture. But questions like, "Who are you? What are you about? Where are you coming from? What do you stand for? What don't you stand for?" Those things, I believe, matter as much today in terms of getting into an artist, as you say, in a world of 100,000 artists going up a day. Those things matter more than people seem to realize. It's not just about a song or an album or, hey, Tony, here's my new album. I'll see you in 2 years. Take care. We don't live in that world anymore. We live in a world where, especially when we talk about new talent, that becomes a very important component. And the other thing that I think is important to talk about in this is that a lot of artists who are having successful careers, unlike the era when you and I started, we don't know about. That's an important factor to talk about. There are a lot of people out there who are making very significant livings, good livings, big livings, and you and I have never heard of them. And I'm talking about places like, selling out the Hollywood Bowl, like people like Russ. Russ is like one of the biggest successful independent artists in the business. I asked a class of 20 students once, about 2 years ago, how many of you have ever heard of Russ? There's about 20 students. Only 9 raised their hand.
Is he that guy that was sat in a chair that kind of exploded on YouTube or something?
No, he's an independent hip hop artist.
Oh, hip hop, right.
Who built a career for himself totally independently. I mean, when I say totally independently, I mean, he didn't do it with a label, like with hit singles and, all the rest. He did it on his own, and it took him about 6 or 7 years. It's a fascinating story. But the point is, Tony, to your point, there are many, many stories like that in the business today where you and I have, we haven't heard of them, or if we have heard, it's, tangentially in an article somewhere. I was astonished. Do you know the band Phish? Phish.
No.
Okay. They're part of what
I'm not up to speed like you are, so I'll be honest with you.
Okay, well they're part of what's called the jam band movement. Jam band, they're like the Grateful Dead were. They'd just come out and jam and play. In order to accommodate the demand when they played New York City last time, it took 13 nights at Madison Square Garden.
Jesus.
13 exactly.
Like,
Beyonce couldn't do 13 nights at Madison Square Garden. Okay, so this is my point.
Taylor Swift could.
Maybe Taylor Swift could. Yeah,
that's
true. Yeah, exactly. But here's the fact that a band that you haven't even heard of can do that. That's part of my point to what you were saying. It is a different world today, and it's also about the tools that artists have to be able to reach that audience that are profoundly different. We lived in a world where it was radio, press, and that was pretty much it. Press was limited. We knew the publications. We knew what they were. I defy anyone today, I don't care who you are, to tell me that you're aware of all of the publications that are out there today. It's impossible. And radio doesn't really have the impact. We all listen to radio. Today, I can't think of a single thing, musically speaking, that we all do.
Sorry to interrupt you. I'll have to interrupt you there, Rich, because I'll forget what I'm going to say, right? But going back to just what you've been talking about now, the thing that it's always been kind of genres of music. We had England threw it over to, you start with Mississippi Delta blues singers. They threw it over to the UK. We got Eric Clapton, we got Jimmy Page, everything like that. Then the hair bands, back and forth. And then punk came along, and you had like the Iggy Pops and the Stooges and all that. And we had the Sex Pistols and the Clash and all that and everything. And it used to last for like 10 years. And then all of a sudden hip hop and rap came in. But let me tell you what I'm thinking, right? I know nothing about hip hop, right? It's just personal taste. I've always been into guitar bands, but they are brands. It's brands that if I put a record out and it was on Jay-Z's label, it could be crap, but it would sell because it's got his name on it.
Yes, it's very true. That's part of what I was talking about when I talked about the identity of an artist. That is important. That is it. Who are you? What are you about? What do you stand for? What don't you stand for? Those things, Tony, matter today. You're very right. It is about a brand and an identity, not a brand in a sense of, selling a commercial or, Louis Vuitton or whatever, but it is in the sense of knowing the values around that artist, knowing who that artist is. They're associated with Jay-Z, or they're associated with, Harry Styles or whoever. I mean, it doesn't matter. It's a very, very important point that you brought up, because it goes to the element of discovery today around artists. I mean, you know how hard it is to do this. Here's my philosophy on that. The most valuable commodity in the world today around marketing is not the size of your company. It's not your market share. It's not money, power. It's something more profoundly simple. It's the ability to get someone's attention. Yeah. And the reason that's the most valuable commodity of all, Tony, because we can't buy it anymore. We used to be able to. We used to be able to say, Tony, what is that marketing campaign going to cost?
And we're not going back to payola, are we?
No, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about marketing campaigns,
radio,
pluggers, PR, taking ads in NME, tour support, all of that. And we knew, and you worked in the business in that era. We knew what we would get back as a result of that, within reason. We don't live in that world anymore. And guess what? Either does Disney or Warner's or Sony or any of the movie or television or book or music companies.
My God, you're such a reality check, Rich. I mean, the thing is, I come from the school of artist development. It was always my favorite topic. I mean, I always say David Bowie, The Police, you know, they would have been fine without me, you know, Whitney Houston. But I played an active role in U2. I got them their first national TV, their first Radio 1 session outside of their native island. But guess
Yeah.
what? It took me an hour. It took me a day. An hour. It took me like a year to get them on the radio. I took them into every crappy little radio station to go on at 11 o'clock on a Tuesday. We're not talking about major cities. We're talking
Right.
any way you could get them in. They paid their dues. They played every shithole in America, in England. They worked their asses off. They'd get in the tour bus, well, not even a tour bus, in a van with the equipment in the back, with a tour manager driving, 4 hours in the pouring rain. They were £250,000, not dollars, into Island Records for tour support. They were emerging talent. They came out today, Rich, we would never hear of them. They'd be dropped
Yes.
within 3 months.
Well, but here's the thing. I would say everything you said is true, but I don't know if they would be signed today until they actually rose to a level where people could actually see them. That's the difference. You know, you're talking about something that's very, very important to
I
understand.
sound like a history lesson at times. I know that.
No, but it's an important point. Let me stress the point you just made because it's very important. You are speaking about a time, and you mentioned U2, which was one of the great artist development success stories. What Chris and the whole label did from the beginning, they built that.
Nobody wanted to sign them.
I know nobody wanted to sign. They built it album by album, single by single. I saw U2 when they came to LA and played the Roxy. That's a little 500-seat club on Sunset Boulevard. Okay, that was the very first record they put out. But the point you're making is an important one because that was in the era when you had to be chosen by a Chris Blackwell or a Clive Davis or an Anna Murdigan to get a record deal. You had to be chosen. It was a faith-based business, meaning the executives and A&R people had faith in their own taste, that they knew a star or they knew an artist that they had faith in. But more importantly than that, they had faith that there was an audience out there in the world for that artist. Now, 85, as you know, 85 to 90% of the time, they were wrong. But when they were right, you got the U2s, you got the Beatles, you got your Michael Jacksons, you got your Bon Jovis and your Whitney Houstons and so forth. And that made up for all of the others that did not succeed on a financial level. Today, we live in a world where you don't need a label to say, Tony, you're good enough. We're choosing you.
Yeah.
So I would say that the whole premise of, you know, what we were talking about with U2, it doesn't exist today. A U2 would need to elevate themselves doing shows, doing all of that work. That's the unspoken part that you and I haven't spoken about yet with regards to talent.
But you know what? Sorry, Rich.
Yeah,
You know.
no, go ahead.
You know what I would say about U2, and I've always maintained this, right? I think they were with the perfect label for them, because if they'd have been with another label, a major label, an EMI or a CBS or a Warner's, they would have been dropped.
Yeah,
it would have been a tax loss. Get rid of them. We'll cut our losses. We'll have something else, and we'll work with that. But the thing is, they were kind of part of a family. I mean, they learnt their trade as Ireland was evolving as well. Because, like I say, there was a period when they owed, they were into Ireland for $250,000 tour support, and Ireland didn't like lean on them and drop them like a lot of people would. And then there was a period where they were owed $1 million in royalties, and it was a case of like, pay us when you've got it. You know, that kind of relationship is incredible. And I think with something like that, there's a lot of bands. And the other thing is, from the era that we come from, like we talk of the Chris Blackwells and the Clive Davises, I mean, they are the music people. But emerging talent for me was kind of so excitable, because even with the Nena Cherries and the Massive Attacks, you know, even Natalie Imbruglia, I mean, it's really hard to promote a good-looking girl who comes from a soap opera. Everybody thinks it's going to be crap, you know.
Right, and she wasn't.
I'm going off tangent here a bit.
Natalie, I mean, I love Natalie Imbruglia. I love those songs. I thought she, you know, they were fantastic, and she was a good singer and had good material. It's you know, I think there's 100,000 reasons why somebody connects or doesn't connect, and a lot of times it's not something that's even visible to us. I mean, I remember when Madonna broke, and you still had people who were naysayers who said, "Oh, that'll never last." And I got to give it to her. I mean, nobody from that era in that genre has ever lasted as long as she has, or had as many hit records as she has, and remained viable.
Yeah.
I mean, she can still tour. It's, you know, That's part of it too. And you know, U2, you're right. Chris Blackwell was able to build them for 2 or 3 albums before, you know, but each one that happened before the Unforgettable Fire, I think there were three, built upon the last.
So it was their fourth album because they had Boy, they had a War, they had a Boy, October, War, and then the great thing was the Under a Blood Red Sky, because
the live EP,
Dave
yes.
Robinson, right? That was his idea, and they did this. They did the 60x4 posters that were in the underground and all like that. But it wasn't much more than an EP. It wasn't a full price record.
It was not.
So it was a platinum album for the price of a single. Brilliant marketing move.
Yes, and then came the Unforgettable Fire when they started working with Daniel and Brian.
The 80s were amazing. I mean, you know, it was U2's halcyon period, but don't forget we had MTV and stuff, which broke the Duran Durans and all that. It was like, and the record companies wanted paying. But the thing is that it's an industry that's been driven by greed a lot of the time. Have you ever seen a film called All Things Must Pass?
Yes, I have.
It's absolutely incredible. I fell upon it. And when people like Springsteen were saying I would always go into a Tower Records, Dave Grohl worked in one and all that. And when David Geffen said, you know, then kind of, it's always been formats that have saved them. You know, when CD came in, they got the artist to take a lower royalty. And then, of course, and I always say this to this day, if I worked for a company called Magic Leap, which was a tech company, and this guy was a rock star in technology, and Bowie was another mover and a shaker, in as much as he saw the internet coming for anybody.
Yes, he did.
If Napster came along, they wouldn't have shut him down. It would have been, let's have lunch. And then Steve Jobs came in with this idea, I don't want to sell singles. We don't get any money on singles. People were buying albums for 3 songs that they liked, but they had to pay for the album.
Yes. Steve Jobs did get them to see the viability of, and what's interesting, people forget that when Steve Jobs first started iTunes, it was at the time when he started it, people forget it was only for Mac computers at that time.
Yeah.
People forget that fact, okay? And Mac was very oriented toward, you know, the creative industry, but market share wise, it was only like a 5 or 7% of the market at that time. As it grew, then they eventually developed the technology for everything. And it did save the business, but it took the industry coming to its knees before they actually embraced what he was offering, which was that the world had changed. You know, you can't hold on to this, you know, $18 item that you're selling anymore. And it was, I guess, the beginning of the evolution of going from a copy model. It was the last of the copy, Tony. The last. We never had anything that was a copy after that. It's the very first time and the last time that we have not had anything to sell in the music business in its entire history. That model that Jobs developed of the iTunes file, that was it. Now we went to an access model, and I believe that the values of the industry changed with an access. When you no longer have to pay for something, the values change. If I said to you, Tony, I want you to come work for me, and I'm Sony, and your friend, it works at Warner's, and he says the same thing, and your friend at Universal says the same thing, and we're all going to pay you £250,000 a year, you're not going to make your decision based on money, are you?
No.
And that's the point that I'm making, is that is what has happened to music today. It's an entirely, and I'm not even sure that the culture gets that. They don't sit there with a checkboard saying, you know, do they fill in all these things? But I believe that that's very much going through their minds, you know. Plus, the other challenge that we have from the era you're talking about is that we have way too much. We have an overabundance. We didn't have 1,800 albums a week coming out back in the days of the 70s and 80s. If you were in the business like you were, we could keep up with that.
Oh, yeah.
We could keep up with it. You know, we knew what was going on if you were following reading.
Just talking to you now, I mean, you came from basically a fan. I mean, so did I, you know, and your job is an extension of your hobby. But just listening to you oh, my God, we could go on forever. I warn you, I keep these to like 40 minutes on the Zoom thing, not because of the money, but because it would take me like 5 hours to edit it. You have so much knowledge that seriously, I'll give you a call in the week if you don't mind, and we'll talk further, because I want to bring a series of things in, which this is so important for the music industry, you know. And the other thing is, I only listened to a bit of it because I didn't have the time, but I started to listen to the Clive Davis thing. And I love that
Oh,
bit that he said, like, he never stops learning. And you're exactly
yes.
the same. And so am I. But you are so much more knowledgeable than me. So I'm going to sit here and be totally greedy. And you're going to hate me for this, because I'm going to bleed you dry, man. This is so important for people to subscribe to something that is like, I noticed you had kind of Don Passman's book in there as well, which
Yeah.
was the Bible, wasn't it, back in the day? And he's an attorney and stuff, and all
Yes.
those things. There's because I see some schools that it's like I worked with Michael Littman, right, who rewrote the Publishing Act. He went in and got all Elton John's publishing. And the thing is, who would you rather learn from, him or somebody who'd read some books on publishing? So the iconic people that were the game changers, and to hear Clive Davis at his age now to say that he's never stops learning, and the same with yourself, and dare I, say the same about myself, is you're never there. You've always got something. And God Almighty, I can't believe how you sleep at night when you've got to think of keeping up with speed with the way things are moving along in an industry like this.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. Thank you for saying that. But Clive is the one who taught me that.
Yeah, what a
Clive is
mentor.
the one who taught me that you're never there. You never stop. He emphasized that when I worked for him. You've got to be reading. You've got to be, if this is to be your career, not a hobby, but your career, you do have to have an interest more than just perfunctory. You do have to be reading. You do have to have what it is really is it's a very strong sense of curiosity of how things work rather than just accepting the so-called norm. And I do have a strong sense of history because, like you, I came from that era. I grew up. I knew the records. I was one of those people who read the liner notes. I
Yeah.
knew who the engineers were. I knew who the producers were. And I've gotten to meet a lot of those people along the way.
But you were one of those people. I have to say to people, when I was growing up with my record collection, I
Yeah,
had to get up off the couch, walk across the room, turn it over, walk back, listen to it, pick the sleeve up. Right, my mate
yeah,
was there. There were no remotes, for God's sake, let alone anything else. But it was the
that's
culture.
right. Yes, it was the culture. And what you just said is a very important point because I talk about this with my students all the time. The very point you just made, I asked them, how many of you have listened to a new album? And, maybe two or three of them raised their hand. And I say, without knowing who, I don't know their taste or anything, I said, I will bet you that the album you listened to was by an artist you already had a
Yeah.
previous relationship with musically. I've never, ever, ever been wrong about that. That's a dramatic shift from what you're talking about because I do remember we would get an artist that we didn't know and we would come home and sit with our friends and we would put the album on and we would read it.
We're
It would
from the
not be
same
background.
school because the
Yeah.
thing is, what I always say is that the generation of people growing up, they've never had it to miss it. I mean, I would go with my pocket money
Yeah.
into Manchester where I lived, get the 9 o'clock train for when the shop opened, and they would have albums waiting for me to listen to. I'd go into a listening booth and I'd come home with one album, and I couldn't wait to go around to my friend's house and play it. But I
Yes.
found it.
Yes.
I
You
get the
found it.
bragging rights.
That's right. And you get to share it with them. I mean, that's the thing. Now,
It's that
music
sense of
is
discovery.
it is. And today we don't have that. Today it's just, it's there, it's free, no matter who, what, where you are, wherever you are in the world, you get access to it.
Well, that's
So,
what David Geffen said in the documentary. He
yeah,
said people's record collections are on their iPads.
correct. They are. That's very true. That's very true. They are on their iPads. And music is like books. You can take 100 books with you on vacation. Remember when you would take like one or two because the luggage would get too heavy if you took more than that. Now you can have your entire library on your iPad or on the reader.
Do you know what else, though, Rich? The thing is, there wasn't even blockbusters then. There was no
No.
computer games. There was nothing else to distract you from music. And the thing is, for instance, I have stories about, marrying the woman who I dated this girl in college, and I went to pick her up for the first date and I just bought Ziggy Stardust. And I go round, and while she was getting ready, I was rifling through the record collection in the living room and I found Hunky Dory. I thought, my God, this is my first date. She's bought the album before me. So naturally, I married and had 2 kids with her. What else would you do? It's a true story.
Yes, exactly. Getting to know who somebody is. There's that great documentary that the BBC did called When Albums Ruled the World. It's a great documentary.
I've never seen that.
You would love that one. If I had a way to
stream it.
No, I managed to get a copy of it because it's not available in the United States.
Yeah.
It is available in the UK. If I can send you the file, I will. You should watch it. What it is it's the time that you're talking about, that 60s, 70s, when the whole culture went from listening to singles to listening to albums, and how the album transformed the culture musically, and how, artists, literally that period of time when, Pink Floyd and all of these people, and Aubrey Powell, the great Aubrey Powell, who was the designer of Hypnosis.
Oh, right.
Him and Storm, the one who
Storm,
designed
yeah.
all those, that was Storm's partner, Aubrey Powell. He says, you could tell a lot about a person when you went into their home and saw their record collection.
Yeah.
And when you just spoke about that with the girl, that reminded me of that. Like, here she's got Hunky Dory, before you did. And it's like, it tells you something about the person that you're looking at.
I did an interview on a podcast on somebody else's the other day, and it was like, it was about gigs that I went to. And I spoke about seeing Led Zeppelin in 1969 and actually going backstage and meeting them and understanding what it was like to meet your heroes. I mean, I just stayed behind to stick my head in the door. I just wanted to watch the roadies taking the equipment down. I was 15.
Did you even know who they were?
I knew who they were, but it was just on the verge of world domination. It was 15 shillings. The UK hadn't even gone decimal, right? On the 15th, the day after my 14th birthday, so I was 15, right? And 7 days later, I saw the Pink Floyd for less than £1 again.
Wow.
And it was incredible, because you've probably heard of John Peel, this DJ,
Oh, of course, renowned.
Well, the thing is, he was the DJ, and the lights went down. I can see the poster. It was like the mass gadgets augmented, more furious madness from the Pink Floyd, right? The lights went down. The place was full, 2,000-seater, right? I've always seen, like you, I've always seen everybody ever meant to be in arenas that were built acoustically, not in like arenas like football grounds.
Right.
And all of a sudden the lights went down, and there was this smell of bacon for like 2.5 minutes. And you're just waiting for the band, and you're starving hungry. It was insane. that was like the opening act. And then Peel came on and started playing the records and stuff. But it's not do anything with things. But, seeing bands like that, and then Jethro Tull and things, in their infancy. And like I always say to people, I have to I have to make sure that I don't sound precious about this. But I always say to people that I've seen everybody that ever meant anything to me in under 2,000 seats. I remember when I emigrated, seeing Springsteen in like the St. Pete Times Forum, which was an ice hockey arena type thing.
Right.
And I'm there, and I'm sat in the back, in the stalls or whatever they're called, and I know it's Bruce Springsteen because it's on the ticket. I know his songs, and I'm watching it on the screens, and I'm thinking, why am I here?
Yeah.
I can go on YouTube and do that, and the sound's probably going to be better anyway.
Right. Exactly. Yes.
I don't even know. We're going to run out in 4 minutes, Rich. But
okay.
all I was going to say was the. I don't even know how people can afford to go to gigs now. There's an arena.
I don't either. I'm glad you mentioned that. Yeah, I used to go to a lot of concerts even when I started in the music business. But the concerts then, even though I was a young kid and I didn't make much money, I could afford a $15 or $18 ticket.
So could I. Yeah.
Today, to go to a concert is, usually between $350 and $500 for a pair of tickets. I don't know how people do it. I mean, yet the concert business seems to be thriving, I guess, for a certain level of artist.
Yeah.
But what about the new up and coming? It's hard.
Well, there was a thing in the UK which was like pay to play. So in my hometown, Manchester, there's a lot of smaller venues. I don't know how it works now, but they do really well. They're all full. But they're like affordable, but there used to be a pay for play. So a band could get a gig as long as they sold 50 tickets, they'd get paid. So there's no risk involved for the promoter. They're going to get an audience because other people are flogging the tickets.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And that same thing happened here in the 80s and 90s in Los Angeles.
Right.
And because what happened is the audience kind of migrated away. It became very difficult for these club owners to be guaranteed that, that audience would come to see whoever. The culture was different. The culture was, it wasn't guaranteed that people would come see a show. I understand it. I understand it. Although, now there's just too much. There's too much music. We live in the era. There's this term called the tyranny of choice. And that's the era we live in.
Yeah.
Like you talked about 100,000 releases a day. That's the era we live in today, where we have just too much. And it is hard to find something that you love or that you're really passionately interested in, or that you want to continue the relationship with. When
Yeah.
so much is coming at you every day, it's difficult. It's a challenge.
Brilliant. We're going to end it there, Rich, because I don't want to go without saying goodbye. I can't thank you enough for this. This is a great education.
You're very welcome.
I think
Anytime.
what you're doing.